On Christmas Day, Roger Baker stepped off the plane at Denver International Airport, carrying 6 carefully chosen gift bags, expecting a warm family welcome. He moved with the steady care of a man who knew every handle and ribbon had a purpose. The terminal was full of music and laughter. He saw a little boy rush into his grandfather's arms, and he could almost feel that small weight against his own chest. He pictured Emma's smile when she saw the doll he had hunted down, the one she had mentioned during their last video call. He pictured Victoria's eyes when she opened the velvet box that held the emerald necklace, the one worn by his late wife and by her mother before her. 3 generations, 1 line of love. He checked the arrivals board even though he did not need to. The plane had landed exactly as scheduled, 2:47 in the afternoon. Outside the tall windows, snow drifted across the lanes where families pulled up, waved, and hurried back into warmth. He shifted the bags and took out his phone. The image on the lock screen showed Emma under a Christmas tree, a missing tooth, and a grin that could light a room. He dialed Victoria. She answered, but her voice sounded distracted, as if she were already thinking about something else. He told her he was there, that the flight had been smooth, and she said they were running a bit late and that he should wait near the exit doors. Then the line went quiet. He lowered the phone and stood for a moment, letting the noise of the terminal wash over him. Late was fine. Late happened. It was Christmas after all. He collected his suitcase and found a spot near the automatic doors. Warm air spilled out in waves each time the glass panels opened and closed. Families clustered there with flowers and handmade signs. A woman about his age held her son so tightly he almost lost balance, and both of them laughed in a way that loosened something in Roger's chest. He imagined this moment repeating in a few minutes when Victoria's car pulled up, when Emma shouted Grandpa and raced toward him through the snow. He set his bags in a neat semicircle around his shoes, a small bright fortress on the gray floor. The burgundy bag belonged to Victoria. Inside lay the emeralds, carefully wrapped. The green bag was for Martin, holding the soft cashmere scarf from a shop Margaret had loved. The cheerful red and gold bag was for Emma, the doll tucked inside as if already loved. He reached into his inner coat pocket and felt the edges of 3 envelopes. Bank paper. Plans written in quiet ink. He had spent weeks thinking through amounts and timing, how to give enough to help without creating dependence, how to honor Margaret's last wish that their grandchildren would always have a path to education. The doors sighed open and closed. Cold air brushed his cheeks. Another family arrived, and another. He looked down the long line of headlights outside, listening to the engines idle and the tires whisper over wet pavement. Victoria's text arrived. Be patient. He read it twice. No exclamation point. No, we cannot wait to hug you. He told himself that people choose different words when they are rushing. He had done the same many times when work at Baker's Auto Parts kept him moving faster than he liked. He slipped the phone away and stood taller. The minutes drifted by. He thought about the first year Margaret had brought cookies to the shop on the Friday before Christmas. Employees from 2 locations squeezed into a single break room, passing a tin from hand to hand. 20 years later, there had been 12 locations. The tin had been replaced by trays and urns of coffee, but the feeling had been the same. You take care of people, and they take care of the work. That is what he believed. That is how he had raised Victoria, or so he had always told himself. A security guard walked past and nodded. Roger nodded back. He checked the time again and decided to move away from the doors to a row of cushioned chairs by the windows. He arranged the gift bags carefully around his feet. He loosened his scarf and took a slow breath. Snow swirled under the lights outside, turning the lanes into soft white bands. He lifted the burgundy bag and brushed a wrinkle from the ribbon. He imagined Victoria touching the emeralds, hearing the story of her grandmother wearing them on her wedding day, remembering the way Margaret's hand had rested at her throat when she laughed. He called again. The ringtone climbed and fell, and then vanished into silence. He stared at the phone and tried Martin's number. It rolled to voicemail. He ended the call before the tone and rested the phone flat on his knee. He could wait. He had waited for parts to arrive and for crews to finish, and for bank officers to return from lunch. Waiting was not empty if it was filled with purpose. The purpose now was simple. Be ready to hug them when they appear. Be ready to make Christmas better. He stood and carried everything to a coffee counter near a gate, bought a large coffee, and tipped the barista, who wished him a Merry Christmas in a tired voice. The heat of the cup helped. He watched travelers move in purposeful lines. He watched a couple share a joke and lean their heads together while they checked a boarding pass. He watched a tiny dog in a winter coat trot beside a child who whispered secrets into its ear. Joy kept showing up in small ways, and he let it steady him. He thought of the day Victoria was born. He had stood in a hallway with paint that had seen better years and listened for the first sound that would change his life. When it came, it was louder and braver than he expected. He used to tell that story at Christmas, not to boast, but because it reminded him that love starts in a plain room with honest work and grows from there. He wondered if he had told it too often. He wondered if Victoria had grown tired of it, the way children sometimes do when a memory belongs more to a parent than to them. A text did not arrive. A call did not arrive. The coffee cooled. He bought a simple sandwich because hunger makes time feel heavier. He ate slowly, watching the doors and the lanes, telling himself that any minute he would see a familiar car pull up. He thought of Emma's drawings on the refrigerator and how she had once drawn him with a cape, like a hero. He smiled at that. Heroes were only grandfathers who made time and showed up. That was all he had ever wanted to be. His back began to ache from the rigid chair. He stood, rolled his shoulders, and took the bags back toward the exit where the air was cooler but the view better. The doors breathed, in and out, their rhythm oddly calming. He tried Victoria once more and listened as the call slid away. He thought about calling Lindsay or Roy, but he did not have their numbers saved. He had always gone through Victoria. That felt right then. It felt less right now. He looked around and saw another reunion. A teenager who had tried to act unimpressed let real happiness spill across her face when she saw her grandmother. They hugged too long for an airport lane, and no one complained. He felt the sting behind his eyes and cleared his throat. He was tired, that was all. Travel does that. Weather does that. Waiting does that. Snow thickened beyond the glass. He checked the time on the arrivals board again and thought of the drive to Cherry Hills Village. The roads would be slow. He reminded himself to be kind when they finally arrived, to say that he understood, to let this be the story they looked back on and laughed about someday. He touched the envelopes in his pocket and the little velvet box, and he pictured how the evening might still unfold. There would be hot food and a place at the table, and Emma's quick feet on the stairs. He set the bags down and straightened the handles so the paper would not crease. He rubbed his hands together to warm them and told himself once more that late is still on time when it is family. A plane lifted into the dark beyond the windows, its lights blinking in the snow. Somewhere a child squealed at the sight of a candy cane. A woman hummed along with a carol on the overhead speakers, a tune about peace on earth and the comfort of home. Roger adjusts the heavy bags at his feet, watching the snowfall thicken, wondering how long he will have to wait. Under the bright airport lights, hours had folded into each other like pages of a book Roger did not remember opening. The first hour had been filled with the warmth of memories, the second with the comfort of coffee and the thought that delays were only temporary. By the third, the holiday glow in the terminal had shifted into something else, an endless loop of arrivals, embraces, and departures that seemed to pass him by. He looked at his watch. It was nearly 6 in the evening. The snow outside was falling in thicker sheets, settling on cars that came and went, melting on warm hoods and wipers before freezing again into thin glassy coats. He checked his phone. No missed calls. One unread text from Victoria sent half an hour ago. Be patient. Just that. No apology, no update on when she might arrive. He read it twice, as if the second reading might reveal more, but the words stayed as they were, short, cool, and without the urgency he had imagined in his daughter's voice that morning. He set the phone face down on his knee and let out a slow breath. He had known other kinds of waiting. He had waited for bank managers to approve loans when he was building Baker's Auto Parts, from a single dusty garage into a regional name. He had waited for suppliers to deliver parts during snowstorms like this one, calling customers to explain that their repairs would have to wait another day. That kind of waiting had always come with a purpose, a clear endpoint. This felt different, shapeless, without any clear boundary between now and later. Around him, the terminal was still a stage for joy. A toddler in a red knit hat waddled toward an older man whose face lit up like a string of Christmas lights. The man bent, lifted the child high into the air, and kissed his cheek again and again. Roger smiled faintly, feeling that familiar pinch in his chest, the one that came when he watched love happen for someone else. He glanced at the green gift bag by his foot, the one meant for Martin, and remembered the day he had picked out the cashmere scarf, thinking it would make a good impression. Now the idea of it felt oddly distant, like something he had done for a stranger. The coffee he had bought earlier was gone, so he walked to the cafe and ordered another. The barista, a young man with hair tucked under a wool cap, wished him a Merry Christmas. Roger tipped him $1, and the young man's eyes softened in thanks. He carried the coffee back to his seat and unwrapped a sandwich he had bought with the drink. The bread was dry, but it filled the empty place in his stomach. Outside, the sky had deepened to a slate gray that would soon tip into night. His thoughts drifted to Margaret. She had loved Christmas. She would have been the first to laugh about a delay, saying it gave them more time to notice things they might otherwise miss. He could hear her voice in his mind, warm and practical. She had believed in showing up for people even when it was inconvenient. That was why he had helped Victoria so many times, co-signing her first car loan, paying off her credit card when she was drowning in interest, covering the down payment on her home in Cherry Hills Village. He had told himself it was just what a father did. Now, sitting here with the hours slipping away, he wondered if all that help had made her grateful or simply comfortable. He checked the phone again. Still nothing. He thought of calling a cab, but the idea felt too much like giving up, like closing a book before the last page. He stayed in his seat, watching the snow spin under the streetlights, telling himself that every minute brought her closer. But another part of him, the quieter, older part, began to prepare for the possibility that this might not end as he had imagined. A family sat down across from him. They unpacked foil-wrapped sandwiches, passing them around, unbothered by the bustle of the terminal. The father looked up, caught Roger's eye, and gave him a nod. Roger returned it, grateful for the small recognition. He was still part of this world, still visible to someone. Hours slid by. The terminal staff began to change shifts. Their voices lower now, their movements slower. The steady flow of arriving passengers thinned. Roger bought one last coffee, more for the warmth in his hands than for the taste. He wondered if Emma was asleep now, her dreams already filled with the morning's presents. He hoped she would remember him next year, even if this one passed without the hug he had been picturing since autumn. By 9 o'clock, his patience felt stretched thin. He picked up the phone and searched for a taxi company, his thumb hovering over the call button. Somewhere inside, the balance was shifting, from trust to suspicion, from waiting to moving. The snow outside showed no sign of stopping, and neither did the quiet in his phone. The cab pulled away from the terminal with a soft crunch of snow under its tires. Roger sat in the back seat, the heater blowing warm air across his face, but the cold in his chest stayed. The driver, a man in his 50s with kind eyes and a baseball cap pulled low, glanced at him in the mirror. "Been waiting long?" he asked. Roger hesitated, long enough to wonder if I was still in the right place. The driver gave a knowing nod, as though he had heard many versions of that sentence before. "Holidays can be messy. People get caught up, forget the time. But you're headed home now, right?" Roger looked at the passing lights. Gas stations, chain restaurants, billboards dusted with snow. Home was a strange word. He had a house in California, but this trip was supposed to be about family, about being welcomed into the warmth of his daughter's home. "We'll see," he said quietly. The city slid by in pieces. Quiet neighborhoods strung with glowing lights, storefronts closed for the holiday, a few lone pedestrians bundled against the cold. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang the hour. The sound was thin against the hum of the tires, but it carried a weight he could feel in his bones. He thought about the presents in the trunk. 6 bags in total. Each one had been chosen carefully, not just for the cost, but for the meaning. He pictured the emerald necklace, a thread of family history he had been saving for years. He imagined Victoria's face when she opened it, how it might connect her to the women who had worn it before. But the longer they drove, the more that image faded, replaced by the unanswered calls and the short, clipped text that had told him only to be patient. The driver turned onto the main road leading toward Cherry Hills Village. The houses grew larger here, set back from the street with long driveways and perfectly shaped hedges. Roger remembered the day he had co-signed the loan for Victoria's house, telling himself it was an investment in her stability, in her happiness. Back then, it had felt like the right thing to do. Now he wondered if it had been just another way to make himself useful. "You from Denver?" the driver asked, breaking the silence. "Born and raised. Built a business here before I sold it." The man smiled. Must have been a good business to sell. Roger almost said it was, but the words caught. Selling the business had been one of the hardest decisions of his life, second only to losing Margaret. The shop had been more than a way to make a living. It had been proof that he could build something lasting from nothing. But the person he had built it for most, his daughter, didn't seem to value the story or the sacrifice. As they turned onto Victoria Street, Roger noticed the glow spilling from her front windows. Inside, silhouettes moved around a table. Laughter drifted faintly into the cold night air, mingling with the scent of wood smoke from a nearby chimney. The driver slowed in front of the driveway where 2 cars sat under a thin blanket of snow. Both looked well kept, ready to drive at a moment's notice. Roger stared at them, his jaw tightening. "That's the place?" the driver asked. Roger nodded. "That's it." The man pulled up to the front walk and put the car in park. 6850, he said gently, almost as if he didn't want to interrupt whatever thoughts Roger was having. Roger handed him 75. "Keep the change. Appreciate it. And hey, Merry Christmas," the driver said, giving a small wave before pulling away. Roger stood there for a moment, the cold biting through his coat. The sound of laughter from inside the house seemed louder now, clearer. He adjusted his grip on the gift bags, each one suddenly feeling heavier than it had at the airport. The snow crunched under his shoes as he walked toward the door. For a brief second, he let himself hope. Hope that the delay had been real, that there was a reasonable explanation for the silence, that the next few moments would erase the hours of waiting. But as he reached for the doorbell, another thought settled in, steady and cold. Whatever happened next, he was about to learn something he could never unlearn. The doorbell's chime sounded bright, almost cheerful, against the low murmur of voices inside. For a moment there was silence. Then footsteps approached, muffled against the thick carpeting. When the door opened, Victoria stood there in a red sweater, cheeks flushed, a wine glass in one hand. The surprise in her eyes lasted only a second before it shifted. Confusion, then something that looked like calculation. "Dad," she said, her voice pitched a little too high. "You're here." Roger lifted the gift bag slightly. "I told you I landed hours ago." She stepped aside, forcing a smile. "We had a flat tire on the way to get you. And then Martin's car." He glanced at the driveway where both cars sat under their neat coat of snow. "Both of them look fine to me." Her smile faltered. "Well, we got it sorted out eventually. Come in, you must be freezing." The warmth of the house wrapped around him as he stepped inside. But it was the curated warmth of a magazine spread, silver and white decorations, matching stockings over the fireplace, a tree perfectly dressed in ribbons. It felt nothing like the Christmases he remembered, with Margaret's mismatched ornaments and the scent of cookies in the oven. From the dining room, voices carried. Roy, Victoria's father-in-law, was laughing at something. Lindsay's voice followed, gentle but animated. Roger glanced toward the table. Empty plates sat among half-empty glasses of wine. Candles burned low. The chairs were all filled, except there was no empty one waiting for him. "Roger," Roy said warmly when he saw him. "We thought you weren't arriving until tomorrow. Victoria said your flight was delayed." Roger set his bags down carefully. "It landed at 2:47 this afternoon." The silence that followed was thin but sharp. Martin shifted in his seat, avoiding Roger's gaze. Lindsay rose quickly, touching Roger's arm. "You must be starving. Let me fix you a plate." Roger nodded slightly, though his appetite was gone. He could feel Victoria's eyes on him, searching for a way to smooth over the crack that had already split the evening. When the plate arrived, he sat at the far end of the table. The turkey was warm, the vegetables perfectly seasoned, but each bite felt like chewing air. He listened to the clink of silverware, the murmured conversation, and the sound of his own thoughts gathering speed. After a few minutes, he excused himself, muttering something about finding the restroom. Down the hallway, the voices in the dining room faded, but from the kitchen came another sound, Victoria's voice. "I wish he hadn't shown up tonight." Martin's reply was low, but not low enough. "He always makes things awkward in front of my parents, those long stories about his little auto parts stores." Roger stood frozen just outside the doorway, every word landing like a stone. "It's embarrassing," Victoria said. "They're sophisticated people. He means well, but he's just not their type." There was a clink of dishes, then Martin again. "Maybe next Christmas we just don't invite him at all." "Perfect," she said. "Once the inheritance is settled, we won't have to pretend anymore." The words didn't just sting. They changed something, like a wire snapping inside him. The part that had held on to hope, to excuses, gave way. He stepped into the kitchen doorway, his shadow falling across the tile. "I heard every word," he said, his voice low but carrying. Victoria turned, her face draining of color. The dish in her hand slipped. Martin caught it, but the damage was done. Roger took a step forward. 13 hours at the airport, 35 calls, and this is what you say about me in my absence. Neither of them spoke. The refrigerator hummed in the silence. In that moment, standing there with the weight of years pressing down, Roger knew the evening, and maybe the relationship, could never be mended. Roger did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The truth had its own volume. He stepped into the kitchen's light and looked from Victoria to Martin with the steadiness of a man who had learned long ago that patience can be sharper than anger. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Roger spoke. 13 hours, he said, each word measured. 35 calls, and a house with 2 working cars. Victoria swallowed, searching for a sentence that could knit the evening back together. "Dad, we were stressed. The day got away from us. I meant to call—" "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "was when I was supposed to arrive. That is what you told Roy and Lindsay." The mention of their names carried down the hall. Lindsay appeared first, concern written across her face. Roy followed, his expression composed in the way of a man trained to listen before he judged. "Is everything all right?" Lindsay asked. Roger turned to them. "I apologize for bringing this into your home, but I believe it is better if we are all present." He nodded toward the living room. "May we sit?" They moved as a group, the room settling around them, the pale tree, the silver ribbon, the faint glow from the candles on the mantel. Roger chose a chair with a view of the doorway, as if he were still bracing for late arrivals. He set the burgundy gift bag beside him, then reached into his coat and placed 3 envelopes on the coffee table. White paper on dark wood. They seemed louder than any words. "I came tonight with gifts," he said, the warmth in his voice thinner now but still there. "For my daughter, for my son-in-law, and for my granddaughter's education." Victoria stared at the envelopes, recognition flickering. "Dad, you did not need to." "No one ever needs to," he said. "Love is not a receipt." Roy's gaze shifted from the envelopes to Roger's face. "You waited 13 hours at the airport?" "I landed at 2:47, Roger said. "I called. 35 times. I was told not to take a taxi. Roy turned his head slowly toward Victoria. Is that accurate? Victoria's voice wavered. We had a flat tire. Then Martin's car acted up. My phone died. It was chaos. Roy's reply was gentle, but it pressed in the right places. Yet both cars are in the driveway now, and we were told Roger's flight was delayed until tomorrow morning. Silence expanded. Martin cleared his throat, but whatever sentence he was building collapsed under the weight of the timeline. Lindsay leaned forward. Roger, I am so sorry. If we had known, we would have gone ourselves. I did not have your numbers, Roger said. I kept believing someone would answer. He let that hang for a beat and then continued, his voice steady as if moving down a list. In the kitchen, I heard my daughter say she wished I had not shown up. I heard my son-in-law suggest not inviting me next year. I heard that once the inheritance is settled, there would be no need to pretend. Victoria's hands fluttered, then fell still. Dad, that is not what we meant. It is exactly what you meant, Roger said. Not unkindly, just firmly. Meaning is what people say when they think no one is listening. The room's quiet changed temperatures. It was no longer the curated calm of a staged holiday photo, but the honest stillness that comes when truth finally takes a seat. Roger tapped the envelopes with 2 fingers. These were certified this week. $50,000 for Victoria, $50,000 for Martin, $75,000 to begin an education fund for Emma, just as Margaret asked me to do before she died. Lindsay's eyes softened at the name. Margaret would be proud of your devotion. She would ask me to be wise, Roger said, so I will be. He lifted the top envelope, weighed it in his palm, and then slid it back into his coat. He did the same with the second. When he picked up the third, the one marked for Emma, he held it a moment longer. Emma is a child, he said. Children do not choose the weather they are born into. I will see that her education is protected, but through an independent plan managed outside this household. That way, kindness does not become leverage, and gratitude is never required as payment. Roy exhaled, the sound almost a verdict. That is fair, and it honors your late wife's wish. Victoria's voice frayed at the edges. Dad, please, we made a mistake. We were overwhelmed. It is Christmas. Christmas is when people show you who they are, Roger said softly. In the best way, and sometimes in the hardest. He reached into his inner pocket again and withdrew a small velvet box. He set it on the table and opened it. The emeralds caught the light, deep green against the pale lining. These belong to your grandmother, he said, then to your mother. I plan to place them around your neck tonight and tell you the stories one more time. Victoria's eyes shone, but the moment did not move the way she hoped. I will keep them for now, Roger said, closing the box gently. Maybe one day they will belong to a person who understands what they carry. Across from him, Martin tried for practicality. Roger, let us not make permanent decisions after one bad night. We can fix this. Roger met his gaze without heat. There is nothing to fix. There is only what is true, and what will be different because of it. He rose, sliding the envelopes and the velvet box back into his coat. As for my will, he added, it will be revised. The estate you have been planning in your conversations is no longer yours to plan. Roy stood as well, his voice low but clear. Roger, I am ashamed of how this evening unfolded. You have been treated with cruelty, and that is not acceptable in our family. Lindsay nodded, her hand pressed to her heart. Please know that we value your kindness and your life's work. You deserved a welcome, not a wound. Roger inclined his head. Thank you. Your words matter. The house ticked softly, the clock on the mantel marking out a future that had just changed shape. Victoria took a half step forward. Where will you go? To a hotel, he said. Then I will start planning a trip I have put off for years. Italy in spring, maybe the coast of Spain in summer. Places Margaret and I talked about when we were younger and always too busy. Victoria's mouth opened, but no sentence came. He picked up the burgundy bag and set it gently into the larger suitcase. The other bags followed, each gift returning to his care without fuss or fanfare. He slipped on his coat and looked once around the room, not to memorize it, but to release it. From the corner table, his phone buzzed. A message lit the screen. "Dad, please do not do this." He let the phone dim. Then he turned to Roy and Lindsay. "Good night, and Merry Christmas." He walked to the door, opened it to the clean bite of winter air, and stepped out. The snow answered with a soft crush under his shoes, the kind of sound that tells you the ground is solid and you can keep going. The night air in Denver was sharp and clean, carrying the scent of pine from somewhere beyond the houses. Roger stood on the curb, the last echo of his daughter's voice fading behind the closed door. The 6 gift bags were gone now, left inside that perfectly decorated house, along with everything else he no longer wanted to carry. The taxi's headlights cut through the darkness, and he stepped forward. The driver, a young man with an easy smile, hopped out to take Roger's suitcase. "Where to?" "The Ritz-Carlton, downtown," Roger said, his voice steady, almost calm. As the car pulled away from Cherry Hills Village, Roger looked out the window at the rows of glowing houses, each one a tiny universe of laughter, clinking glasses, and holiday music. They looked warm, but it no longer mattered. He was headed somewhere warmer, not in temperature, but in spirit. The hotel lobby greeted him with soft light and the quiet rustle of expensive fabrics. A doorman in a crisp uniform took his bag. The receptionist smiled as though she'd been waiting for him all night. "How long will you be staying with us, sir?" "At least a month," Roger said. "Possibly longer." She tapped the keys, her voice polite but warm. "Business or leisure?" Roger allowed himself a small smile. "Pure leisure." When he opened the door to his suite, the city lights stretched out like a map of possibilities. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Rockies in the distance, their peaks dusted in snow. He set his suitcase down, walked to the window, and pressed his palm against the cool glass. For years, his travels had been about visiting others, family, business partners, obligations. Now, for the first time in decades, they would be about him. The leather chair at the mahogany desk seemed to invite him to sit, and he did, pulling out the hotel's gold pen and a sheet of stationery. He began to write, not a letter to Victoria, but a list. Spring in Tuscany, summer on the French Riviera, autumn in New England, winter wherever there's warmth. He added smaller things too, learn to cook something complicated, drive the Pacific Coast Highway, spend a whole day reading by the sea. The list grew until the page was full. He folded it neatly and slipped it into his wallet, where the checks for Victoria and Martin used to be. Later, soaking in the deep marble tub, Roger closed his eyes and let the heat unwind knots he hadn't even known were there. He thought of Margaret, her laughter, her faith in his dreams, the way she used to tell him that life was meant to be lived, not just endured. He imagined telling her about tonight, about the choice he'd made to step away from those who took and never gave back. He believed she'd be proud. By morning, the decision was complete. He called his lawyer to change the will, redirecting his estate to causes and people who valued him. He booked the first leg of his travels, a flight to Rome in 3 weeks, first class. That evening, he ordered dinner sent up to his room. No one else at the table, no forced conversation. Just the city lights beyond the glass and the knowledge that the rest of his life was his to shape. It wasn't loneliness he felt. It was space. Space to breathe, to think, to live. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft and silent, covering the streets in a fresh layer. A clean slate. And for the first time in a very long while, Roger felt the same. There's a certain quiet that comes after a long storm, the kind that settles in your bones and lets you finally breathe again. Roger's Christmas night ended far from the table he once thought of as home, but closer to the peace he'd been searching for all along. In the stillness of his hotel suite, with the snow laying a fresh blanket over Denver, it became clear. Walking away wasn't loss. It was liberation. We all reach moments in life when the truth rises to the surface, no matter how carefully others try to bury it. For Roger, the truth was wrapped not in ribbons or emerald necklaces, but in the clarity that dignity is worth more than inheritance, and respect is worth more than shared blood. He discovered that defending your own worth can be an act of kindness to yourself. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is quietly close a door and turn toward the horizon. The heart of this story isn't about betrayal. It's about the resilience that follows it. It's about the steady voice you find when you decide that your life, your time, and your generosity are not to be squandered on those who cannot value them. Holding your head high is not arrogance. It's a promise to honor the years you've lived and the roads you've walked. In Roger's case, the road led him not back to the people who turned him away, but forward, toward a world still waiting to be explored. Maybe you've had your own version of that Christmas, an evening when you realized you were giving more than you ever received, and not in the way that fills your heart. And maybe you've learned, as Roger did, that stepping back from those who diminish you is not bitterness, it's self-respect. Life has a way of offering new doors when you've found the courage to close the wrong ones. Like a lighthouse standing unshaken in a winter gale, dignity casts a steady beam, guiding you through the fog of hurt and misunderstanding. The light may not change the storm, but it keeps you from losing yourself in it. And if you keep following that light, your own light, it can lead you to places you never thought you'd go. So tonight, as the snow falls quietly outside your own window, think of the spaces you fill with your time and care. Are they warm? Are they worthy of you? If not, remember that there is no age, no season too late to step into a better chapter. If this story touched your heart, perhaps let it be a gentle reminder for someone else who might need the same encouragement. Sometimes, the kindest gift we can give is the reminder that they too can walk away from the table where there's no seat for them, and toward the life that's been waiting all along.